So my experience is a little bit different, and I wish that I have a pleasant one. So when I decided to make a phone call, which is was 5 days after the incident happened, I called a non-emergency line, and the police said, I cannot file the report for you. You would have to meet me at the incident site. And I just grabbed my inhaler because I couldn't breathe right away. I told them that I don't think that I can do that. I don't think I can see the place where it happened. Plus, I have my little one at home with me. He was off school on that day, and the police say, well, unfortunately, if you don't show up at the incident site, there is nothing that he can do for me.
Okay, so I've had 3 abusers, and 2 were reported, so I'll talk about those 2. The experience, I want to call it swift. It seems swift and intense, which I appreciate. But it was from the get-go. Law enforcement response was very quick to question me, to set up these like sting phone calls in both cases, to speak to my family members and any other witnesses. It was very intense, and so I felt that the um, first little phase of my reporting was just very, very involved. And then I felt later in the process like it was a bit less involved, which was nice because, as I'm sure all of you know, it's hard to be, you know, in deep all the time, you know. So that was my experience. It was just very, very involved, very intense, very swift.
My experience, I could probably say that I know I have had other abusers throughout my life, but none of those were reported. And so this was the first experience. I was 15 at the time, and I was in school. It had happened over the weekend, and I was kind of still in denial because I didn't know really what happened to me even. So I was just talking through it, just kind of with my friends, like the one friend that I trusted. And I couldn't go through classes. I just kept breaking down. And like my teacher started to notice. And then my friend pulled me out and was like, oh, you have to say something. I was like, what do you mean? Like my parents are I was, not where I was supposed to be when it happened. I was 15 years old. So I just didn't want the shame. Like I didn't want the questions from my family. There was just a lot of fear, obviously. So but I eventually just had to, because I couldn't keep going through like the motions. So I went to the school guidance and gave her like the gist of it. And she immediately was like, if you want to go through with this, I'm just letting you know that if you tell me this right now, like this is me, I'm a mandated reporter and you're gonna have to make a deposition. That's just the way it works. And so I was like, all right. And I just decided from that point on, I knew everything was gonna change. But they took me from the school to the police station without telling my parents or anyone else. I just went in the police car straight to the station, and it's like hours probably by myself with detectives, just like replaying it because they need to know every little detail of like the whole night, even though the rest of my day didn't have anything to do with this person who took advantage of me in a certain place. Like what I was doing beforehand was up to scrutination, you know what I mean? Just victim blaming, but
I was assaulted by my former boss at the company event out in public where the coworker witnessed it and nobody saved me. It took me about 5 days before I say something to someone. And I was not gonna report to the police because I don't know how to even start talking to authority, feel intimidated, but I did make a phone call. So make initial phone call, it was uncomfortable to speak about something that you're not even sure, you're still in denial of what happened. Yeah, that's how I felt.
Okay, so my experience, I didn't report right away for a lot of the same reasons that kind of others have mentioned, like being in a little bit of denial, and also like I was under no illusion that I would be treated with any amount of respect. I assumed that as soon as I reported, I would be kind of put through the ringer right away. I expected to have somebody, like my first experience, to be met with being asked a lot of victim blaming questions. I expected all that because that's all I had ever heard. And I did not want to report. I didn't want to do it. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. I didn't think it was worth my time. So that was how I like felt it was going to go when I first tried to report it. And then what actually happened was, a couple days later, after some things had happened that made me decide, like, yes, I should report this. I just felt too guilty not to, because just for a number of reasons, it was pretty clear to me that I did not feel like I was the only person who he had done it to. And I felt really guilty for that. So I decided to go ahead and report and felt like it was the right thing to do. And when I called to make a report, my friend drove me into a station and I spoke with an officer who turned me away because it was the end of the day. And he said that he didn't want me to have to repeat my story. And I was like, annoying, but okay, sure, fair. So then I was told that the sergeant of the sexual assault unit would contact me the next day. So I stayed home. I didn't go to class. I didn't go to work. He never called. And then on Friday, or I think that was a Thursday, when I called him later that day, he asked me if I could just wait until the next week. And this is a Thursday. I'm trying to get this done as fast as possible because they always complain that victims don't report this right away, right? And like I'm here trying to report and they're telling me wait till next week after some evidence is likely to go missing, things like that. Like it was like I was reporting a stolen pillowcase. Like they did not care and like had absolutely no sense of urgency or care about what had happened and the fact that I stayed home to be able to report. And they said that they were going to take my report that day. And then, so they did actually send someone the next day because I was like basically begging them to. And the person they sent out, I was expecting him to be horrible. The first time I met him, he was eventually, but the first time that I met him, he asked open-ended questions. He told me to start where it made sense to start. I felt that the interview I had with him wasn't that bad. The only thing that was like negative really about it was just that he, again, also was just very ignorant. And I felt, the questions they ask you are very just personal and uncomfortable because that's the nature of the crime anyway. So when I finally got to talk to somebody and actually have my first interaction, that first interaction went pretty well. I did a confrontation call right away, which I wish had been done at another time and had actually, a little more planning. I thought it was too rushed, but overall, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be the first time.
I actually had a really, really great experience with law enforcement. The first time that I reported, like I said, in the answer to my first question, it was very swift response. So I was contacted by a lot of people, a police officer initially, and then a detective, and then it was 2 sex crimes detectives, and they were very careful with me. These were Portland police officers, I do want to note, and I think that Portland is a more is definitely a place where there's more victim-centered training. Just because of the political climate there. So I think that that's probably why my experience was what it was. But yeah, each time with the police, I felt very protected. I felt like they were exhaustive with their questions. Like they tried to make sure that every single question that could be asked was asked of me, that I didn't, and they tried to get through it in its entirety just once or twice, so I wouldn't have to keep telling my story over and over and over again. They asked me if I wanted a woman present to see if I'd be more comfortable with that on both occasions. So it was a very wonderful experience. I was also given their work cell phone numbers to contact at any point in time if I had anything to add to my story, or if I even just wanted to talk to them for support. So I had a very positive experience with law enforcement. And then throughout the entirety of the cases, it was the same thing. They'd call me regularly and check in with me and see how I was doing, or just updates on the case or what exactly was happening. For instance, when they interviewed the suspects, I would get a phone call afterwards and they would let me know how that went and what happened. So, like, again, my experience was very positive. I understand that that's not everybody's experience, and I feel very fortunate to have had that. But I also, I love sharing that because I think that the positive experience with law enforcement aren't shared as much as negative ones. So, and I honestly, I feel like I owe a lot of them my life, truly, because it did lead to the successful conviction of one of my abusers, and that changed my life. So,
The police were nice at first, and they gave me, well, it's their job, but they immediately asked me if I would like a victim services representative, which I obviously accepted because I was in the room with two middle-aged men. As a 15-year-old girl, I really wanted a woman there. So she held my hand as they gave me the kit in the hospital. I know that's not this topic, but I had a really bad experience with that, with a nurse treating me very poorly. She helped me through that. The police specifically, they were nice. They bought me McDonald's because I was there for like maybe 5 hours. I don't even remember. It felt like 5 hours. And I guess overall, like I don't know if it's not really their fault. I was a minor, so moral of the story is like I feel like I was left out a lot of the process, but they didn't really have much of a choice in that. My dad had to hear all the gruesome details about my assault through the state attorney or through the police, like, because they couldn't go directly to me. I wasn't involved much in the process. Didn't really get to say like how it ended much, except for accepting the plea deal or not. And got a lot of victim blaming. Like for my age, I felt like I was kind of taken advantage of with just like police questioning, like very like pushy, like trying to get more on my character than they should have.
So my experience is a little bit different, and I wish I have a pleasant one. So when I decided to make a phone call, which was 5 days after the incident happened, I called a non-emergency line, and the police said, I cannot file the report for you. You would have to meet me at the incident site. And I just grabbed my inhaler because I couldn't breathe right away. I told them that I don't think that I can do that. I don't think I can see the place where it happened. Plus I have my little one at home with me. He was off school on that day. And the police say, well, unfortunately, if you don't show up at the incident site, there is nothing that he can do for me. I was in tears, but I say, okay, fine. I accept that, but I'll call back. So they did give me the phone number. At least he did give me the case number in case I call back. And I felt like he didn't want to follow up with me of if I'm gonna call back or not. It's almost like treated as I'm prank call him or something. So the very next day I made arrangement to have someone take care of my child. And I make a phone call again. And this time I told myself, regardless of what happened, I want to be able to say that I made a phone call and I did not just do nothing. This time I got a phone call. I talked to the person, and the police on the other end say, I just basically told them, I'm calling back because I need to set up the time. When do I have to meet you at the incident site? Because I was told by the officer yesterday. And next thing I know, the supervisor jumped on the phone, and it was a female police officer, and she apologized profusely. And she said, I am very sorry that that was told to you. We can meet you wherever you want us to. And that's how it started. Once I met the police officer in person, there were two of them. So the experience turned to be completely different. They're very respectful. They, of course, asking all kind of questions that make you feel uncomfortable because you have to basically reliving your trauma. The most difficult thing would be when the police officer hand me a piece of paper and pen and asked me to write everything that happened. It's 5 pages long, but it took me 3 hours after multiple pen drops because I keep telling myself that I don't know if I can go through with this, but I did. And since then, experience has been great. They've been keeping me informed. Yeah, not my experience, not the greatest, but it's not the worst, I would say.
Yeah, so as far as how the police treated me, I think bottom line, horrifically. It was the single worst experience of my life. They handled it so poorly and did so much just inappropriate smearing and blatant defamation of my character that's like demonstrably false and not rooted in truth or reality in any way at all, that they actually tried to, when they presented this to attorneys, they just didn't like me, which I'll talk about a little bit more, but they intentionally withheld critical evidence that like most survivors of a drug facilitated assault don't even have, and just decided that they were going to try to paint me as basically a crazy person. And it was mishandled to the level that it actually, at this point, my case has totally been taken away from this agency. They're not allowed to make any more case supplements or do anything else to damage the case further than they already have with their unprofessionalism. And it's been given to an entirely different agency. And this new detective, like, I haven't talked to him and I don't know anything about him and I don't really care to. So that's one thing. But like, as far as the things that went wrong, like, I noticed very early on that they weren't really doing anything to actually investigate the offender. Like, they did a couple things early on that made me feel like they were, you know, taking what I said seriously. Like in the first couple of weeks and the first couple of months, I did feel like my detective, although rather ignorant to how to actually do his job, was trying to do little things that made sense, and they were, you know, somewhat helpful. So I'll give him the very little credit that he deserves there. But like after that, they weren't really investigating the offender, and I questioned that. And I found out that if you question police on them doing their job or not doing their job, they're going to hold it against you. So basically, it was literally like these past 3 years have been really just them trying to figure out how to destroy me as a witness and like take away my credibility, which it took them like 3 years to figure out how to do. And it still wasn't like, it just didn't work. So it was like all these people, all the way from the detective to the sergeant who I talked to, all the way up to the captain, who were doing things intentionally to harm me and to harm my case. So essentially it was just basically like 3 years of emotional abuse that I really didn't need. And it's very, very, very painful to know that that's what happened when what you're trying to do is protect the community from a person, and trying to heal. And they just want to like dig the knife into you and twist it until you basically like emotionally die away from the process and don't want to participate anymore.
So in my case, so I'm going to say how I was treated by the DA. I didn't sue civilly, I sued criminally. I was my first DA is still one of my best friends and mentors. He was absolutely incredible. So I do want to say though, I came forward in 2009 about my first abuser. And back then it was easier for DAs to talk to victims. Now there's a huge emphasis on DAs not speaking to victims because you don't want to become a witness in your own case. So that it's unfortunate because it does help the legal process and it helps our cases as victims, but it also creates a disconnect between the DAs and the victims when you feel like that's somebody who's, you know, speaking up for you and trying to, convict somebody for sexual assault on your behalf. So back then, though, so that's over 10 years ago, it's 12 years ago now. Back then, I had a much more personal relationship. So we actually went out to coffee. He spent time with me. He answered my questions. I felt protected by my DA. The second time when my case was turned down because of lack of evidence, actually same thing. She really went to bat. It was basically a he said, she said at that point with my second abuser. It was a he said, she said case. And she worked so diligently to try to find any possible way to prosecute my case. And she spoke to me about it and called me and just said, hey, is there any text messages we can recover? Anybody else you told during that time who could corroborate this? And so she was very involved in the process. So I've also had a wonderful experience with my DAs. And when she called me to tell me it was turned down, she was so empathetic. So I had a male and a female, both wonderful. But she was so empathetic when it got turned down and really described to me why it was and provided me with resources and said that I could always call their victim advocates, even though I wouldn't have a pending case there anymore. So wonderful experience for me on behalf of the DA's office in both cases, different counties.
I don't remember a whole lot because it was like over 6 years ago now, but the DA was a woman in my case. I remember her name was Takesha. She was very nice, but just like it ends up seeming like a negative experience, even though she was a positive influence just because of the information that she had to impart on me every time we met. It was more so like it was her helping because it was informing me of what could be used against me from the defendant's lawyer or his side. So I kind of, every time I went, it was just kind of like a checkup for all the scary stuff that I might have to face if like I didn't take a plea deal eventually, which I did. So yeah, that's about all I can say about that.
And as for me, my lawyer, he was very respectful. He reached out to me and asked me a lot of questions. My case still pending. It hasn't been a year yet, so a lot of things still in the work. But even though I'm lack of evidence, he doesn't make me feel like this is the end of it. He still want to make sure that he is willing to work for me, and if I willing to seek justice, and if I want anything. So I feel like that the best quality in my lawyer is that he listen. That's number one thing that I would wish everyone that's dealing with, sexual assault with victim can have that sympathy to us.
So I guess I just want to talk about my experience with, I had like a barrage of lawyers for different purposes. So I had a Title IX attorney who was helping me specifically with my university case. He was really busy, and like in my state, there's just like no one really willing or able or for whatever reason, there just aren't Title IX attorneys that I could find in my state. So I had to go with someone at a different level, and he was working on other high profile cases, had a huge caseload, and I felt like he was really helpful because I think he was seen as like a threat by the university. But like for me personally, I just would get updates here and there, and I didn't feel like one way or the other, I guess. I don't really want to talk about like the civil aspect of things because that wasn't really super important to me. It was just sort of like a last ditch effort. And then a lot happened with that, overall a negative experience. And then on top of that, so of course the prosecutors are dealing with a criminal case. And since I haven't really gotten to that point, I don't really have a lot of personal experience or any conversation with them really specifically, but I will say that the fact that they took a bunch of misinformation and evidence that was never presented to them and just took probably some of the most wild things they've ever heard about a victim at face value without ever actually seeing the evidence and looking through that case file by themselves, it gives me absolutely no faith in them or the system. So overall, a negative experience for me, and maybe that will change, but I doubt it.
I was treated just as the system is. The DA's job is to question you about the crimes, and the defense attorney's job is to cross-examine you and undermine your testimony and have you question your memory and recall of all the events. So I think I wouldn't say it was positive or negative. I think it was just exactly as it should have been.
Okay, as I stated earlier, I did not go to court. The process took 2 years, just like going through until we eventually reached a plea deal, which I agreed to. The charge was dropped multiple times because obviously like there was no consent involved. I was almost unconscious. But that didn't matter. The charge was dropped to statutory because I was 15 and he was an adult. So he had only, luckily, like, you know, for me, he had confessed to just the simple act, like having had a consensual encounter with this person, not knowing my age at the time. So that's all it was. It was like lewd and lascivious with a minor or something in Florida. So yeah, that's all.
I have not get to that point yet, so I have not gone to court, but I'm going to share back about what I have. Two detectives that assigned to my case, and at one point a couple months ago when he called to give me update about his interview with the abuser, he did say something to me. He's like, so do you still want to pursue justice? And if so, how would you feel about it being on stand? To me, I feel like that's not really appropriate question. So I did tell him, I'm gonna need to table this for a little bit. I don't know if I can answer you. I need to speak with my lawyer. So there go my answer. I have not gone to the court yet, but I can only imagine how would I feel.
Likewise, I haven't been. I think it would be very traumatizing, but I have not been, and we'll see.
I had extensive evidence. I had text messages, I had MySpace messages, I had emails, I had video surveillance from hotel rooms where I was taken when I was a minor. I had a lot of evidence. So that really helped. And then again, we did one of those phone calls that are recorded where he didn't know that the police were on the line, and so we had a full admission. I was able to get him to. It was actually a really exciting moment, and exciting is kind of a weird word to use, but I think you go into those phone calls really nervous about what they're going to say, or if they're going to catch on to what you're doing. And I managed to get out almost everything over like a 30-minute period, and I got off the phone call like, oh my god, please tell me that the recording was successful, because I don't think I can get that information again. The second time, no. I waited with my other abuser. I waited 15 or 16 years before coming forward, and with him I didn't have anything anymore. It's really unfortunate because I think that he's a threat to other women, but that just happens. The only thing I had was my own testimony, which still is evidence. Everybody needs to know that any witness's testimony is evidence. So even a he said, she said case, that's evidence versus evidence. But I did not in that case. And we were not able to do a successful call in that case either. He would not pick up the phone. So, and that's why there wasn't enough evidence. Oh, and the one last thing I did have in that case is that I messaged him when I was intoxicated, and I was kind of not re-traumatized, but I was intoxicated in 2012, and was thinking back on my trauma, and I messaged him on Facebook, and I said, all these things about what he did to me and this and the other. And it showed that he read my message, but never responded. And that's actually evidence itself, because normally somebody would deny that the claims being made against them, and he did not. He just didn't respond. So that was the only evidence I had, and it wasn't sufficient. So I lucked out in one case and did not in the other.
As I said earlier, the incident happened over a weekend on a Friday, and then I went into school and didn't report until a Monday. So my rape kit was done 4 days after the actual incident. And the defendant, I never knew him ever. He was a stranger to me at the whole time. But so there was no contact, there was no outside, this was a one time, nobody else knew. We were never acquaintances even. But they gave me a photo lineup of all the people. I remembered where he took me from, the area, and they gave me a photo lineup of all the men in his age range. And I picked out his face, and whatever they did to, get him to just, say what or that he had sex with somebody, even though that's not what it was. But yeah, I luckily didn't have to do any type of contacting him or anything, because I don't know. And There was no physical evidence, obviously, like in my rape kit, because it was 4 days after. Unfortunately, like, you know, they asked me, like, oh, did you wash your clothes? I'm like, why wouldn't I? Like, it was the worst night of my life. Like, why would I not wash my clothes? You know, like, I want to wash my whole body. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I just want to scrub, 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 scrub. Like, and his bed his bed initially had blood on it because it was my first time, TMI, but not like that it's a time at all, because it wasn't. But um like, I told the police that they went in his house and tried to find any kind of like forensic evidence, my blood or something, which was inconclusive. He put them in the trash or something because they were nowhere to be found. So yeah, the only evidence they had was his admission to statutory.
Well, I got rid of evidence as well. I burned my clothes because I felt disgusted. I don't want to see these things anymore. I don't want to have any thought about it. The only thing that I have, I also have the detective. We did the control call, so we got a full admission, and it's my first time have a detective write a piece of paper and tell me, okay, ask this question. They come up with scenario and they tell me you are going to go full blown asking question. So he did admit it, but he did blame me that, well, you ruined my family and you make my wife now want to leave me. And I can hear his little one in the background, but then I have to tell myself that it wasn't my fault. I was not the one who initiated anything. So that was the only thing that I have. And to me, that's almost like a singing in my ear where I thought I was dreaming the whole time, but it did actually happen because he said it and I have witness to listen it with me this time.
Yeah, so in my case, I have like mounds of evidence, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's so infuriating to me that it's not being like, just the egos of police officers mattered more than finding justice and protecting the community in my situation. And like, hope maybe that will change. I don't know. I have no faith in it anymore. But I think it's frustrating because like I had a rape kit that had DNA in it. I had video evidence of me like literally face planting on a lobby of where I was brought to, because like I was, the only explanation for me blacking out for 4.5 hours was that I was drugged. I had like a total of, at the bar, a glass of wine and then like half a sip of a mojito, and then I remember nothing. So that in itself is like really bad. And then there's evidence like the receipts to confirm how little I had to drink that night in the controlled call, which he also, like, he never flat out admitted it, but he said things that just didn't make any sense. And a lot of things to corroborate exactly what I said happened. Like he was like, oh yeah, we both got drugged then. We definitely both got drugged. And I'm like, but why do you remember everything? And I don't. Like, explain that one to me. But then there were other things too, just like other things that like I have, but and the police have, but I want to keep in my back pocket that I don't really want him knowing that I have, that make it pretty clear. So I think that's what's so frustrating is that like there's so much evidence. And then also another victim who came forward who is someone from like 12 years in his past. Like what else do they want? And then it's so frustrating because like, yes, like I am a witness to this. Like I am evidence. Like I am an equal part of this process, and he hasn't come up with any single thing to reasonably explain anything other than what I've been saying. So it's very frustrating to have that much evidence and to know that it was so mishandled and that other people are vulnerable because someone decided not to do their job.
Did I see justice? Yes and no. I did see justice in my first case. I did not in my second. Do I feel that the sentence matched the crime? No. I was a teenage sex abuse survivor. And so I've done another panel with the Survivor Tribe, and I explained in there that I don't think that teenagers or adults are taken as seriously as children. The emphasis is a lot, and that is obviously so important, but we're all important. We are all, equally important, no matter what age we are assaulted at. If we were sexually assaulted, we matter. And because we're older, as teenagers, we, have sex or have the ability to understand consent. There's times where we're not taken as seriously, and I see that, I saw that in my job as a DA, and I see that in daily life. Well, why didn't you just tell someone? Because you could, if you were 5, maybe you couldn't, type deal. So when my abuser, my first one, I'm going to focus on that one because the second one was not convicted, but when my first abuser was convicted, it was in court. And my mom had invited everyone we knew to come support me. So there was like 100 people in the courtroom, which I was not happy about because as you know, all the details have to come out, and they were very heinous details. And I didn't really know she was inviting all these people. So on one hand, I was really upset that she invited everybody for like a public showing, but on the other hand, it actually helped my case, and here's why. The judge said at the end, after hearing sentencing recommendations, so the DA gave their recommendations, the defense asked for probation, I'm sure. And the judge actually said to the defendant, my abuser, he said, Mr. Gale, I had considered giving you probation given the age of the defendant, given the age of the victim. However, looking at all the people in this room and all the lives that you have affected, I cannot in my right conscience give you probation. And then he sentenced him to prison. And it was not a sufficient amount of time, in my opinion. I believe that he only served 3 years. I think we were looking closer to 7 is what we were hoping for at the least. I mean, being optimistic, it should have been around 15 to 20. But that moment really impacted me and made me want to become a DA, because I thought, I don't care if there's 100 people in this room or just me. I'm the only person in the room whose life was affected that truly matters for the purposes of this case, right? Mm-hmm. And it made me it broke my heart right then hearing that for every single other victim. Makes me want to cry now, who does not have that support and like system to come support them in trial. You know what I mean? I just thought, what about girls who don't have anyone? Who don't have those kind of families, who don't have that, all those family, friends, and, immediate family members, and, just all these people to come support them. And there's so many women who don't have that. So that's how I felt about it. I was really disgusted that the judge made that comment. And I thought that, when talking about whether the sentence was proportional, I cannot believe that mine was dependent upon the presence of other people when the presence of me in that room was the only thing that was necessary.
I did, in retrospect, yes, I got a plea deal for a much lesser charge. And he ended up serving 18 months with time served on house arrest. So in jail or prison, I'm not sure exactly at this moment, it was a long time ago, probably less than a year. Like he was on house arrest for more than a year. So I know he wasn't in jail very long. To touch on the age thing, I just wanted to mention that it was very like mind-boggling to me that in my own state, like my age did matter a lot in my case, because it would have been completely different if I had been just 1 week older. It was a week before my 16th birthday, and in Florida, 16 is the age of consent. There's a Romeo-Juliet law where they could try position it in court to seem like you had some type of relationship or whatever, even though usually there has to be consent from the parents in those cases. They usually use it as, a way to put some ambiguity into everything. So really, like, the sentence that they got for me was only for under 16-year-old people. So there would have been no real evidence at that point. So yeah, I did see justice, but definitely not as much as I think that I should have, given the circumstances.
For me, no, I did not see justice. That's my answer. For
me, as far as justice as it's, defined in like the traditional legal conventional sense, like still no, of course. And I honestly don't believe I ever will. But it's also had me kind of rethinking what I actually feel like, what is justice to me, and what are other ways that we can achieve justice that doesn't involve this like adversarial system that is re-traumatizing. And if every single survivor has to go through a process or like the majority go through this process that is incredibly painful, incredibly re-traumatizing, get ripped to shreds on some kind of like on the stand or going through whatever, and then have your experience invalidated, whether it be through the police, the DA, the judge, or the sentence that the person gets, then like what kind of justice is that? Like, that's not a system I would wish on anyone. And I feel like in my case, unless like, you know, unless there's like a serial predator who is removed from society permanently, I don't think that it's possible even to see justice. And that's my current perspective on that. It changes a lot. I think about it a lot.
I have to speak really about my job on this one. As a DA, when you're taking in cases, you have to be able to, you have to know ethically to proceed with the case. So you have enough evidence to show beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime occurred, right? So without evidence, no, you can't, because without any evidence, you can't prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. But I think we can give more emphasis to cases that are just witness testimony, because what happens is, you know, if I believe, let's say Kate, for example, tells me her story and I believe her, you know, I believe beyond a reasonable doubt that it happened and that I can prove that just with her testimony, I can go forward with that. The problem is that district attorneys don't want to go forward with those cases because it's a ton of work and you only have, if that's all the evidence you have is the he said, she said thing, it is really tough. But you know what? It's tough. That doesn't mean you can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. If the jury believes my victim, it's done. So I think that the only thing that we can do with respect to the lack of evidence issue is to have the strength and confidence to take on those cases that where we don't have evidence except for the witness's testimony, and try to bolster their testimonies somehow and their credibility, because you know, that matters as well, because defense will dig into whether they've been convicted of crimes in the past, whether they've lied in the past in jobs and things like that, whether you've been fired or kicked out of school for dishonesty. So, I mean, you know, pulling information from kind of wherever we can to show that this victim is credible and trustworthy source. So yeah, I guess my answer would be, that's kind of the only way to go about it at this point, is just, again, having more faith and confidence in ourselves as district attorneys to proceed with cases. You know, even if we think, gosh, we have like almost no evidence to go off of, we have evidence and those cases matter.
I'll just agree with what she said. I don't have anything to speak on this subject.
I feel like as long as I feel like the world, most people, you know, that you come into contact with, they're like, well, that's your fault. You're asking for it. Is that victim shame, the victim blaming still happening? I feel like the conviction, can it happen? Yes, with all the evidence and everything, but it's gonna be hard to, you know, he said, she said, and trying to get to that point of, you know, I don't know if all the victim want to go through that, to be honest. Not everyone gonna want to go through that. So, but I like what Jasmyn said.
I think what's frustrating to me about the whole process as it is that like sexual assault in our society it doesn't, still culturally across the board, it matters a lot less than other crimes do to a lot of people. And that's reflected in the way that, you know, we have like a nationwide 1% conviction rate of sexual assault. Like, there's an issue that goes beyond just evidence. And I think that that's like one of the main things. Like, and I think I really loved what Jasmyn had to say. Like, there is evidence, testimony is evidence there. And like, does it take more work to get those cases prosecuted? Yes. But you also look at cases that already have all of this evidence and they're still not being tried. They're still not being prosecuted. And it oftentimes is not because, you know, someone thinks that they can't prove it. It's because a lot of times they don't want to put the work into it and they don't want to put the time into it. And if there's any kind of barriers or obstacles or things that they think they can't overcome but could, such as like, you know, in drug facility cases, using expert testimony to be able to say like, you know, even though most drugs leave the body within a couple of hours and it's unlikely that someone who is drugged is going to test positive for any substance, you can have an expert witness come in and testify about what the victim was feeling, when they started feeling that way, how long that lasted for. Like, there are so many other ways to tackle these like hurdles that come up that I have personally heard prosecutors, police, detectives, whoever working the system say that they're impossible to overcome, and they're not. So for people who are willing to go through that process and survivors who do want to go through that process and hopefully have, you know, more convictions, I think that there are already ways that that can happen. And the fact that it's not being done already is very, very, very frustrating. And if we could even just start with, you know, trying cases that might not be easy and trying cases that, you know, prosecutors don't want to lose because it looks bad on their record, but it's a good case. It's just like risky because society has a certain view of sexual assault. I think the more of those that you get out there and actually try and start to see some wins, like across the board, not on a Hollywood level, but like just on a regular human level, I think that all of that can really change things as far as not even just what evidence you need, but just as far as believing any case of sexual assault that's coming forward at this time.
I think my best advice is, first of all, I want victims to know that it's going to be a whirlwind. It's a lot to come forward. It's a lengthy process. It's a detail oriented one. It's intensive, and it can obviously be re-traumatizing. Be vocal about that. As a now former DA, I can say that, you know, if I had a victim who was feeling uncomfortable with anything, I know that officers can be tough and different, you know, obviously we've had you know, all different answers on how people have been treated by the police. I think be vocal in how you're being treated is a really important thing. If you feel like you're uncomfortable, or you feel like you want a woman present, if you feel like you're not ready to talk about something quite yet, be vocal about that. And then also just I would say, to be prepared for not only the legal process, but what's going to happen outside of the courtroom and outside of the DA's office and outside of the police station. Coming forward, for me, I was exposed to everybody in my community and all of my family and friends. And at every Christmas party, at every family gathering, whenever I ran into anybody at a restaurant, it was, oh my gosh. And they wanted to talk about, oh my God, I can't believe what's going on. And be prepared for that, and not in a negative way. I think that that's it. I know that it dissuades some people from coming forward and wanting to actually come out and have their abusers prosecuted and convicted of crimes, because it does expose them, right? And sometimes that even involves media coverage, which is a whole different ballgame. But I just encourage all victims to be confident in coming forward, because the more we do it, the more we're going to normalize it, the less, you know, shocking and taboo that it is. Something that I've always said is, you know, we can talk about any other crime, not rape, but robbery, you know, burglary, home invasions, even up to murder. You know, we see it all the time on TV, but you bring up sex abuse and it's whoop, we don't want to talk about that. So I think the more that victims come out, the more that we come forward, the more that we have these cases tried to the public, and we have juries, you know, deciding these cases, the less we're going to stigmatize, or the less sex abuse will be stigmatized. And I think that we're going to be able to make it less taboo in time, so that it's not such a shock factor and it's not such a big deal when it does come out. And we shouldn't, our generation shouldn't have to be burdened with that, but we are, and that's a responsibility we have to take on. And generations before us had to take on their own things for us to be able to be in the position that we're in now. So that would be my answer. Just be confident coming forward, be ready for it, and just know that you're paving the way for women that come after you to be able to come forward and have it handled in a better way than your case was handled.
I definitely love that statement. Yeah, just in general, I think that like the system, you should be ready to, have it be very difficult. But don't be discouraged by that, because it is, not to say that it will, you know, eventually hopefully bring you some closure. I think, like, from my experience, it likes to make you feel like a piece of evidence, like a number, like, but you're not, like, your story is still personal to you, and like it's really hard to share it. And for me, like, I wanted to just hide away and pretend like it didn't happen, and that's okay. Like, for a long time, like, everybody wants to tell you to speak out, but it's really hard to do. So like in your own time, you'll get there, and like when you do, it's gonna be worthwhile. And Just like don't take for granted, like if you do have the privilege of getting victim services like an advocate or a system to help you, make sure you take advantage of that because they can be really wonderful.
Be strong. Don't let anyone disrespect you. And certainly find a way to care for yourself, either meditation or anything. Do you know the process is going to be difficult? So find a way to take care of yourself.
I think that the first thing I would say is don't expect this to be a process that leads you to find healing. The system, the court system, the legal system exists to punish and to hold someone accountable. You're a witness for the state. You're not even really seen as like a human being, and that can be really dehumanizing and invalidating sometimes. And even though someone might end up getting a sentence or, you know, be held accountable in some way, that might be healing for some people and it might not be healing at all. If somebody gets away with probation or a short sentence or something that you don't find to be healing, that's because the system is not set up for you to feel better. It's set up to, you know, exist so that it has this, like, the focus is on the defendant essentially, or at least that's how it's supposed to be, but it's not on making you feel better. So like in that vein, like if you choose to do it, I think it's really important that you get right with yourself about knowing that what happened to you is not something that you ever deserved, no matter what the outcome when you decide to go through the process, and no matter what anyone says to you along the way. And also to get a really good support system that you can lean on, especially in times when things go sideways, so that, you know, they can keep grounding you. You can keep going in life, because it's a life-changing process in very negative ways sometimes. I think also just like honoring yourself and the fact that your thoughts might change throughout the process, and your goals and what you need for healing might change throughout the process, and that comes first, because you're not the reason that this person chooses to rape people, and whether or not you or a system decide to hold that person accountable, that's not on you. So just honor yourself, find your healing, find your strength, and don't let a system built to protect others and not necessarily you take that away from you.
Hi, my name is Jasmyn and I'm a survivor.
Hi, my name is Kristen and I'm a survivor.
Hi, my name is Boom and I am a survivor.
Hi, my name is Kate and I'm a survivor.